How you doing, guys? For those of you who don't know, my name's Jay Laverty. Enamels, they etch into the surface, so it adheres with it. And that's why you don't have so much problems with masking. Ideally, what you want is as smooth a surface as possible for the paint to go onto. People have problems with masking tape lifting paint from a model. Generally, that's because on the surface of the model, if you have dust, say if you've been sanding or polishing the model, and you have these dust particles, well, obviously those dust particles won't stick to anything except the tape. When we're talking about using Alclad and people feel that it's difficult stuff to use, nothing could be further from the truth. It's very, very simple and easy to use, provided that you've prepared your surface like I've shown you. So pressure is important. So you don't want to spray Alclad at too high a pressure, unless it's your primer. Primer you can spray at a higher pressure, but when you're spraying with the metallics, you definitely do not want to spray at a very high pressure. And I always work with pipettes, and I've always got a bottle of, that's just Alclad airbrush cleaner, thinner, and this is as complicated and as technical as working with Alclad is. It's just patience, spraying it correctly, applying it correctly, and then leaving it to do its stuff. Don't worry about coverage where it's not, if you've sprayed one pass and it's not fully covered the model, don't worry about it. Do it on this next pass, and this stuff dries quick enough that now that will be dry enough that I can apply another layer of paint. It's a shame that you can't get in really close to see this, but as I work along, you can see the reason I spray in one direction always is that where the end of the spray is, the edges of the spray, it's not as glossy. So you get, as you work your way up, you get this line of above it of not so glossy paint. So as I work my way up, and if I say spray that there, you get on either edge of it, you get this not so glossy layers of paint. And so that's why I always start at one end and just work my way up. It's a technique called wet painting. So when you put the paint on wet, it's glossier. You got micro mesh. You want to always polish wet. As you're polishing, you're removing the dust particles and the particulate that settles on the model that normally you wouldn't get rid of. And if you were polishing dry, you're charging, so you get a static charge. As I polish this, it's getting very nice, but what I'm doing is giving it a static charge. So all the dust particles in the air are drawn to it because it's statically charged. Doing wet, we're not creating a charge, but also this is getting far, far smoother. If I take that and I work my way up, always working your way up in grade, 6 thou, 8 thou, and then 12 thou, 3600, that should be 12 thou. So I just work my way up. That's got all the dust particles from the previous sanding on it, so just put a bit more water on it. Normally, the best way to do this, stand in front of your kitchen sink with it running just very slightly, not to waste water. You know, we all got to be very environmentally conscientious, haven't we? So after using the 8 thou, I go to the 12 thou, but you stand in front of the sink, and as the water's running over the surface of the model, it's washing away the dust particles as you go. As you see, as I polish this, now we're on the 12 thou, which is extremely fine, and this should come up, like the other wing that I passed around, like a mirror finish. And this is as simple as it is, and this is the magic, and this is that, you know, everyone wonders what's the secret to using Alclad. It's preparation, that's it. Generally, when you can see yourself in it, that's a pretty good indication as well. Because on this, there, you can hear it squeaking now. And that means that this surface is ready. And so as you can see on the other side, it's not quite so perfect, but before I put primer on, I'm never too worried about it being absolutely perfect because the primer, Alclad's gloss black base, if you're using high shine, reflective metallic lacquers like airframe aluminum or polished aluminum or chrome, that's when you want the really high gloss finish. If you want that to really shine and be reflective, then you want gloss black. I always recommend, even if you use the regular Alclad. Micro primer, black, white, gray, which I like to do sometimes if I want to have different sort of, you can create different shades of panels just with one Alclad color by using different primers. So if you've got your black base and then you put some panels gray and some panels white, then you can create different shades from the same color. What I always do is if there's an aircraft that's natural metal, gloss black, and then I put on the airframe aluminum, and then if you want, pick out some panels like with duralumin. I'm just under a bar now. That should be good. So now I shall spray airframe aluminum. I'm just going to get rid of all the water residue that I didn't properly get rid of on this. But as you can see, this is pretty shiny. That's a pretty shiny surface, which is ideal. And as you can see, so is this. And that's already touch dry. Now, the other thing about any paint, I don't care what it is, people say that they like acrylics because they dry quick and you can move on quickly and all that. Well, the mil-spec range of enamels dries just as quickly as acrylics, but I always say leave it overnight to dry. If you're going to mask it, if you're going to do anything to it, if you're going to handle it, especially if you're going to buff and polish it, leave it overnight. Well, what the Alclad thinners are is the basic mixture, the thinning agent. So it's the same stuff. So that's why it cleans the airbrush perfectly, because basically it's the thinner, airbrush thinner. You can use that to thin any paints, really. But the problem is that it's a formulation. It's not just one thinner that's the airbrush cleaner. There's a couple of thinners in there. We call it 50-50, and I can't tell you, I'd have to kill all of you if I told you what the secret was, the recipe. But no, but it's a recipe that, so it makes the paint dry very quickly. And so then you can put two and two together in your own head. Where the mil-spec paints came from was the bright bulb went off in somebody's head and said, well, enamels don't dry quick enough. I don't like the drying time, so what can we do to make them dry quicker? Oh, well, Alclad dries pretty quick. And so therefore, and all we had to do was figure out the secret ingredient to add to the mil-spec enamel paints so that they don't dry so quickly that they deteriorate. And so there's 3 thinners, and once again I can't tell you because unfortunately I'd have to kill you, but there's 3 thinners in there that balance each other out. When I'm working with Alclad, I don't generally put too much into the cup because it settles. Maybe about half. If you filled it up to the top, you'd be spraying for so long that by the time you're spraying, the pigment would settle at the bottom of your airbrush, and so by the end of your spraying, you'd have nothing. But it also helps every once in a while give it a little shake. Start at one end, off the model, and I always spray off the model to start with. Off the model, finishing off the model. Never make your turns on the model, because when you do, you can see what happens is you get this pooling. If you look in the center where I just sprayed it, at the edges where I made the turn, there's a big pool of it. Trick to working with Alclad is patience. It takes some time to build it up. You want to maintain a consistent distance from the model. I usually recommend about 2 centimeters, and that's because you don't want to be too far. 2 to 3 centimeters is good, because once you start getting further away, the pigment's going to start drying before it hits the model, because it's been in the air for so long. And you want to keep it at a sort of as level as you possibly can. This one, TR1s are a 0.2 millimeter aperture. It doesn't have to be a fine airbrush. You can use any airbrush. You're not going to get it straight away, boom, that's it, it's done. I mean, on real aircraft, a friend of mine, he used to paint real aircraft for a living. And they didn't just go along with one coat and go, and that was it. It takes a couple of coats. You know, they can get up to 50 coats on some things. Going in one motion and keeping it consistent, because as I've sort of strayed away from keeping nice light coats, I've put more pressure on it, and you can see how quickly and easily that shows up. Yeah. That's duralumin on this flap. That's duralumin because I wanted a different texture, because I think these were all metal, but a lot of the Japanese fighters, they used, like early British fighters like Hurricanes and stuff, they had cloth covered flaps. So that is going to be different, and I like to have the flaps be a slightly different color. But as you noticed when I was spraying, I just oversprayed it with airframe aluminum as well, because it blends it together a bit rather than being such a stark contrast. Change the direction. And sometimes I do. Now that I'm just spraying the leading edge, you can see how easy it is to get rid of all the streaks. The guy who does I probably shouldn't say this, but the guy who does our paints, for the company that manufactures our paints, he says if it doesn't smell, it doesn't work. Because aromatic, you have like low odor white spirit, and that's nowhere near as good as white spirit. But low odor aromatics, it's just not as good. That's a simple fact of it. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of Aquagloss, or if you ever used Future, but when Future got discontinued, there was a lot of guys going, oh my God, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get Future? But that nullifies paying any stupid money for Johnson's Clear on eBay or buying anything else. This stuff is simply the best. And I'm going to say it, but my relationship with Alclad long predates me working with them. I swore by everything Alclad did for years and years and years. If you ever read any of my articles way back when I was editor of SAM, before I was the editor of SAM, I always used Alclad stuff. And that was why it was a dream for me to be able to work with them when they said, you know, do you want to come on board and work with us? But that is, Aquagloss is the universal varnish that you can use it over top of acrylics, you can use it over top of enamels, over lacquers, everything. Straight out of the bottle. Don't even shake it.
I don't shake it?
Don't shake it. I think it says it on the label. Do not shake.